So hi everybody, welcome and thank you for joining us for today's Unlimited Connects North. My name is Isabella Tulloch Gallego and I am Programme Manager for Unlimited based at Shape Arts, and my pronouns are she, her. I'm a 30-year-old white woman with kind of mid-length, dirty blonde hair and wearing a navy blue top, and I've got gold earrings. And I have a plain wall behind me. So just before we start this event today, I just want to do a bit of housekeeping and a couple of reminders. So if we can ask you to turn your cameras and mics off for when you're not speaking, just to keep the panel as kind of visually clear as possible. You can actually hide all like non-video participants by clicking on the three dots at the top of the right hand of your video square. If you do have any questions, please pop them in the chat or use the Zoom reactions. These are at the bottom panel as well, so you can raise your Zoom hand to ask any questions, and we'll get to you as soon as we can. Then we've got a couple of Q&A sessions, parts of the session throughout today's event. So if you do want to ask your questions on screen when the time comes, we'll invite you up. If you require captions, there's the closed captions or CC box at the bottom of your screen to view these. And thanks to Joanne today for providing these. We also have a stream text link if you prefer that. And my colleague Tony, I believe, will pop that in the chat for you. If you use BSL, please pin the interpreters to your screen for live conversations. Our interpreters today are Lauren and Natasha. If you can both give everybody a bit of a wave. Great, thank you. So you can pin them by hovering over their video and clicking the pin icon. If you'd like to multi-pin to enable this, just let us know and we can sort that for you. And so I'd like to thank Ben Pugh for providing the digital production for today. So this is a relaxed event. So if at any point during the event you'd like to walk around, make yourself a cup of tea, take a break to lie down, please do so. And please engage with us on social media with the hashtag UnlimitedConnects, which is hashtag UNLTDConnects. And just to remind everybody that we are recording this session as part of our access offer. So let us know if you'd like us to send you the recording. I'm almost done, I promise. My colleagues Harry and Tony are on hand to help with any access issues that might crop up, so just message them in the chat. Unlimited is an arts commissioning programme that enables new work by disabled artists to reach UK and international audiences. And so we're really pleased to be having this event today. The first half of the first hour, of today's event, we are going to show a very special video that announces some exciting news about Unlimited. And I will ask my colleague Joe to pop up on screen in a second. Following that, we will have the panel discussion and our first break. And then once we're back, we have 4 pitches as part of our pitch and mix with Q&A element for those to get those questions ready. And then we have a pudding session, which is a post-event virtual space for audience members to continue the conversation. And it will be hosted by Georgia and her team. And you may have already got the link. Hi, Georgia. But we are sharing Aidan Mosby's I Was Naked Smelling of Rain, and that's available throughout today's event. And we will pop a link in the chat for that as well. So just a quick reminder, if you're just joining us, please, if you can turn your cameras and mics off when you're not speaking, to try and keep the panel as visually clear as possible. Thanks, guys. I will pass over to Joe.
Hi, I'm doing very well. I managed to put my camera and my mic off. I'm Jo Bowent. I'm senior producer at Unlimited. I'm a 50+ white woman with blue hair, tending towards the plump thanks to lockdown, and sitting in my lounge in Bradford in Yorkshire. So thanks ever so much, Isabella, for letting me hijack Connects today, because we've got some exciting news. I say it's a secret. It's probably the worst kept secret in the history of secrets, in that if anybody's read any of our job packs, then they'll know. If anybody was eagle-eyed and on Twitter this morning from lunchtime, they'll probably know as well. But basically, after 8 years as a program, we're becoming an independent organisation and we're moving home. So we're moving from our delivery partner's home in London, and I'll let you watch our little video to find out where. Hi, I'm Jo Berent. I'm senior producer for Unlimited. We've been a programme delivering for 8 years for disabled artists, and we've been based in London. But guess what? We're on the move. Our new independent organisation is going to be based here in Wakefield. So we thought we'd come along to Wakefield and make a few friends.
Welcome to Wakefield.
Welcome Unlimited.
Welcome.
Welcome to Wakefield.
We're really excited to have you here, and I'm excited for what you'll be able to bring to the people that we work with day to day.
We really want to see more people with disabilities celebrated.
Welcome to Wakefield.
Honestly, I think Unlimited is like my family. I love it. Welcome to Wakefield.
Welcome to Wakefield.
We're really excited to welcome Unlimited into Wakefield,
providing opportunities for disabled artists to develop their careers.
It's really important for an organisation such as Unlimited, with its commitment to developing and nurturing and promoting disabled artists, that artists who are disabled across any art form are welcome and can prosper. Welcome to Wakefield.
Our gallery is delighted that you're joining our thriving cultural scene, and we look forward to future collaborations. Welcome to Wakefield.
The Art House was founded by a group of disabled and non-disabled artists who wanted to create a space where they could work in parity, and we're so excited that Unlimited is going to enable us to do even more of that here in Wakefield. Welcome to Wakefield.
Unlimited have an amazing record of supporting, funding and promoting the artwork of disabled people across the UK. We are absolutely delighted that Unlimited are going to be making their home in the Wakefield district.
So Wakefield is going to be our new home, and if you want to watch that video again, or you want to see it with audio description, then you can go to the blog that's on our website, and the links to alternative formats are on there, and I think somebody's going to pop that into the chat for us now. It's thanks to the incredible support of Arts Council England from an Arts Council National Lottery project grant of £750,000. That means that we've got funds until 2023, which will enable us to make that move and become an independent organisation. So we're incredibly grateful for that funding and for that opportunity. I'm going to stop now and settle back on the sofa to watch like the rest of you. So I'm going to leave you in the really safe hands of our chair for this discussion at Nikki. So can I ask you to introduce yourself and give yourself an audio description? Over to you.
Thank you, Jo, and really excited that you're going to be moving up north. Hurrah! I am Nikki Miles Weldon. I am Joint Artistic Director and CEO at Dada. I am a white woman. I have bleached white hair. It's quite fluffy today on top. It's shaved at the sides. I'm wearing headphones, brown rimmed glasses, a black and gold Adidas top, and I'm sat in the Dada office. And I'm really excited to be here today to be chairing this panel discussion and thinking around what questions need to be posed by the creative and cultural sectors to keep audiences engaged in climate change. Feels like quite a big question, but I feel it's at a time, a real important time, that as artists, we start thinking around what can we do? How can we be involved? So I would like to introduce you now to today's panel. So first up, let's start with, as he's turned his camera on first of all, let's go straight to Hassan El Zavar. Give us a brief audio description of yourself and tell us a little bit about you.
Hello everyone, I'm Hassan. I'm currently today wearing a blue Aztec printed top. I'm a South Asian male, have a black beard, short cut hair. That describes me. I am I'm a limited commission artist. I have directed and produced a piece of art, an audio immersive exhibition called HEAR, which stands for Hearing Extinction and Audiological Relapse. And we'll go into more detail about it later, but it explores the intersection between hearing loss and climate extinction. And it will be coming to Wakefield Art House in January 2022.
Brilliant, thank you, Hassan. Let's go over now to Emma Beverley. Emma, give us an audio description of you and who you are.
Thank you. Hi everyone, my name's Emma. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a white cis woman in my early 30s with dark brown curly hair. I have on a white jumper and I'm wearing pink hoop earrings. My day job is that I'm executive producer for Leeds 2023 Year of Culture. And as a volunteer, I'm also a climate commissioner for Leeds and part of the steering group for a body called, a network called Sustainable Arts in Leeds, which is all about creating a more climate-friendly creative industries within Leeds.
Brilliant, lovely to have you here, Emma. And now over to Cheryl Beer.
Hi, my name is Cheryl Beer and my pronouns are she, her. I'm a 56-year-old white woman with long brown hair, erring on the wrong side of plump. I think that's safe to say. And I wear 2 hearing aids. I became hearing impaired 5 years ago with hearing loss, severe tinnitus and hyperacusis. I'm wearing a sort of green hoodie type dress thing, my red square glasses, and I have and I'm in my office, which is at home.
Brilliant, welcome all 3 of you. So I'd love to hear first of all from Cheryl and Hassan about the work that you've created as Unlimited artists that has this link to climate change. Hassan, can we hear about your work first of all, what it entails and how it came about?
Yeah, so I also suffer from hearing loss, and I got my hearing aids quite late in life, when I was 16. I'm 27 today, so it was quite a big impact on my life. And one of the things that I noticed is I hike a lot in the Peak District. I'm from Sheffield, and I just didn't realize how many sounds I was missing out on when I put my hearing aids on for the first time. I couldn't believe the wind was so loud. I couldn't believe the birds were so loud. I couldn't believe the water, the rivers that I was walking across were so overpowering. And it got me thinking as an artist. And I guess the idea stuck with me for a long time because it only took 11 years for me to come to getting this idea of HEAR, where I was like, there's this clear parallel between climate extinction, where people are telling me that we're going for the 6th mass extinction, and hearing loss. I was quite fortunate to train as a science teacher and come across quite a few researchers who studied biodiversity. And one of the measures of biodiversity that we do, and biodiversity meaning the amount of life you have in a particular ecosystem, particular habitat, particular space, is that you drop a microphone into that ecosystem and you just hear all the sounds. And then you use the sounds to identify the different creatures, the different birds, the different animals, mammals, whatever there. And I became really interested in this idea of what we call bioacoustics, the idea of the sounds of life. But then also taking in consideration that actually there were some sounds that I just wouldn't hear from being somebody who suffers hearing loss. And I guess what HEAR explores, the exhibition, is that if the 6th mass extinction is happening right now, what is the difference between the sounds that we hear today in comparison to the sounds that we would have heard 200 years ago? Is there a distinct difference? But also really interestingly is that we don't notice that difference overnight. That difference is a gradual change. Frequencies just leave, pitches leave. And I think that there was a remarkable parallel there between my experience of hearing loss, or what I end up having a sensory hearing loss, where people don't wake up one morning. Well, most people who suffer from this particular hearing loss, my understanding is they don't wake up and suddenly have this hearing loss. It's a gradual progress of losing certain frequencies, losing certain pitches. And I guess that those parallels have been brought together and we play around with it in a space of an immersive environment and record it here. So I'll stop there because that's the exhibition in a nutshell. And yeah, the website just been posted into the link. below into the chat, and the sounds that we played around with and we created using, using real world sounds being created by researchers or collected by researchers and composing them together can be found on that site too.
Thank you, Hassan. I really loved what you said there around how do we know what sounds are missing? And I think that, that's a real time for reflection, isn't it? Because of going, what will exist in 10, 20 years time on this beautiful planet of ours? What's gone before? And yeah, for me, there's that real reflection and that moment of, wow, it is a gradual decline, isn't it? As you said, like an extinction. Absolutely.
And if I can also just add another layer onto the exhibition, that we used real world situations. So there are stories of people who suffer from hearing loss in particular environments. So we were able to capture the story of a young girl in the Borneo rainforest, a mangrove fisherman, Ahmed, who lives in the UAE, and then a couple in the outskirts of Sheffield. So there was this sort of real resonance of like, actual people and their stories. So the Sheffield one, which I was able to work quite closely with in lockdown, is the idea of a couple who brought their dream home near a forest. And then the forest getting gradually smaller because the Northern General Hospital is expanding. And the sounds that they're seeing change over the period of their lives. And then also their kind of this sort of dilemma they face is it am I actually missing the sounds because my hearing's going down, or am I missing the sounds because they just don't exist anymore, or they're getting warped by the sounds of cars and ambulances? Is that why they don't exist anymore? So yeah, it's been a lovely process to play with, and I must say, so I still get quite emotional listening to the sounds too. It's quite an emotional process to undergo.
Yeah, I can imagine it is, and that feeling of what we didn't know we would miss. And Ada Mosby just put in the chat that one of the things around lockdown, one people noticed, was the reappearance of natural sounds. Also, when intensive farming was halted due to foot and mouth and mad cow disease, the repopulation of the hedgerows and fields was starkly noticeable, as when the redisappearance when farming recommenced. I know for me, living quite near the centre of Manchester, that during that first lockdown of sitting in my garden and really like this bird song, but also the stillness, more birds in the sky going past, like not many airplanes. It felt quite tranquil at a time when the world felt like it had stopped. And it's amazing now. I sit out in my garden and all around me there are planes going across the sky, very few birds now, and kind of drowned out by traffic. Cheryl, could you tell us more about your piece as well?
Yes, of course. And I really resonate with that whole kind of what you're saying there, both of you actually. So my main commission with Unlimited is called Canacoid, which is Welsh for Song of the Trees. And I'm working in 4 remaining declining pockets of rainforest, Celtic rainforest here in Wales, across Wales. And that rainforest actually used to be one rainforest, but has over the years through so-called modern living become separated. So under the soil, it would have been joined together. It's been carbon dated back 10,000 years, the moss in some of those rainforest pockets. So I wanted to find a way to create a sound sculpture that reunited and empowered those rainforests. Firstly, because hardly anyone, even here living in Wales, knows that they exist. And if we don't know something exists, how can we save it? How can we preserve it? How can we stop destroying it if we don't know it's there? Interestingly, 2 of the sites that I went to were bang next door to nuclear power stations. So vast areas of rainforest were cut down in the 40s, 50s, 60s to build to prepare and build the nuclear power stations, which have been decommissioned, but will take another 50 years until they're actually gone. So on the one side of the river, you're standing in a Celtic rainforest that's actually mentioned in the Mabinogion, one of the oldest story texts of Wales. And on the other side of the river, you have Mantulrog nuclear power station, which is really such a profound experience. And welcoming you into Fenrir rainforest is the mother of all oaks, the biggest oak tree you ever saw in your entire life, with a dog tag nailed to her, because she's part of the Kew Gardens rare and special species. And she's actually got her arms open facing the nuclear power station. I mean, it's just the most, you know, it's just the most incredibly life-changing experience, really, as soon as you walk in. So how I ended up applying for my main commission was that I became hearing impaired just seemingly suddenly. I woke up one morning and couldn't hear the birds. I lived in the countryside, and every morning I'd keep the window open to hear the bird song, and I couldn't hear it. And I thought, oh, that's odd, the bird's very quiet this morning. And then just this noise in my head instead. And I thought, oh, well, they must have left the telly on, or is it the fridge, or is it something electrical in the house? And actually I'd had severe sudden hearing loss and replaced by, you know, tinnitus basically, which then developed into hyperacusis, which is a sound sensitivity. And I was a musician before that happened to me, touring and performing in front of thousands of people. But for about 9 months, I didn't dare come out of my bedroom. It was so disorientating. And I lived opposite a woods, and I used to just go over the woods and bathe my feet in the river and lay on the moss and hold the trees and smell and stimulate all my other senses to try and detract from the tinnitus, you know. And I realized in that time of healing how incredibly important nature is to our well-being, because I think without that connection to nature, I wouldn't be sitting here. And without my wonderful NHS hearing aids, which 9 months later, I got my 2 hearing aids, and I decided that I would bring nature sounds to other people. And I was working with, because I'm the director of Sound Memories Dementia Friendly radio station, so I started an environmental channel and working with older people to bring nature narratives into care homes. And then when the pandemic happened, and older people weren't allowed outside at all. Like, remember, Nikki, you know, we were only allowed out once a day for our walk in that first pandemic, you know. So that it became very, very important to everyone to go outside, but older people were kept inside. So I did a project funded by the Arts Council of Wales called Walk 19, which recorded the favourite walks of older people, and then we went 5 artists local to those areas, went out and recorded those walks and then played them back into their care homes. And we had 8 exhibitions online which attracted over 5,000 views. It was, you know, we didn't expect it to be as to go as big as it did. But the more time I spent in nature during the pandemic, the deeper I wanted to go. And so I applied for an ADU R&D grant, research and development, and it was a mentorship. And I wanted to work with nature specifically in crises, because I feel that nature came to me in my moment of crisis, and now I want to do something for her in her moment of crisis. And so I based myself down at the flood defence walls here at in Llanelli, where I live. And I really went there to look at the visualization of sound. How could I use spectral frequency, which is something that's used in hearing test technology, hearing aid test. How could I apply hearing aid test technology in a way that would enable me to see the sound of the sea, to see what sounds I was missing with the sea? Because hearing aid technology, hearing aids are measuring pitch. In your test, they're measuring pitch, and where you can measure pitch, you can, I'm a musician, where there's pitch, there's music, you know, but I didn't realize that when I went out. I didn't quite twig what was going to happen, and that's the nature of research. And ended up notating the flood, the incoming tides behind the flood defence wall. And that then motivated me to want to go deeper beneath the bark. And Canacoid is specifically looking at repurposing biomedical and hearing test technology to measure the biorhythms within the trees. The tree is a huge pumping system that pumps water from the roots upwards. Water wants to go downwards. So imagine it's pumping water upwards to the leaves. And within those two, one of the tubes is called a xylem, and that's got just water in it. One is called a phloem, and that has mineral salts in it, which causes a conductivity, which can be measured. So I measure that conductivity and translate that into digital sound, which I then bring back to my studio and notate into music, so that it's basically music led entirely by nature. So I'm composing from the biorhythms of the trees, and then started experimenting with the ancient moss and with ferns, and combining that then with the ambient sounds that I actually miss myself. I record them and I don't know they're there until I get back. Like the morning bird song, any bat activity, owls, you know, the different times of day in the 4 pockets. And then the end sound sculpture, which is launching at the National Botanic Garden of Wales next June, and also launching with Coed Gadw as a physical trail through Felynreid Forest. That will be a symphonic poem of the 4 rainforests composed, orchestrated as one piece, with the sound sculpture of the ambient sound around it and an archive to show what you're listening to. And we've successfully now transported 6 oak acorns that have been cultivated at Snowdonia National Trust Nursery for us. And they're being planted at the Arboretum Woods of the World at the National Botanic Garden of Wales to launch the project next June. So that's it in a rather large nutshell.
Love it. I think it's so interesting, just the way that idea of you getting into capture the sounds of the trees, you know, this major living, trees are living, aren't they? And the thing that we're all taught around, like to keep planting trees, they're a life source for us. So to know that you're capturing their sounds, but
and
the
also
fact that you're capturing that.
Sorry, because you're delaying, I don't know when you've stopped talking. Sorry, Nikki, to talk over you, I apologise. But to remember that sound is vibration. All sound is vibration. And that's the key to my work, really, is that all sound is vibration, and that you can visualise sound. And people have, and that's why when I describe myself, I say, oh, I'm a hearing impaired environmental sound artist. So I want to deconstruct this notion about what hearing impaired people can and can't do. And just by saying that statement, those collection of words, people are, you know, surprised that somebody with a hearing impairment would be working within the field of sound. So for instance, I just made a piece for BBC Radio Wales about my project, and I edited my piece myself. It's on BBC Sounds at the moment. And I was the first hearing impaired person to make their own piece, to edit their own piece for BBC Radio Wales. And the producer said, oh, I hadn't really thought about hearing impaired people being able to make their own, you know, edit their own work. And she thought about visually impaired people, but not necessarily hearing impaired people. So it's changing attitudes. And also I'm gearing the work around, in terms of like audience, I really want to, I've looked at the iconography of my work, and I blog daily on Facebook, and I have vlogs, and building up a kind of personal relationship, an emotional relationship, particularly with the 50+ age group, because a lot of the environmental campaign work is focused on young people, and yet we have a very high percentage of older people within our society. And by excluding them from the conversation, we're actually excluding a large number of people that could be making a huge difference to the way we treat the planet.
Great. Thank you, Cheryl. Thank you so much for that. I'd love to pass over now to Emma, who you're here with a couple of hats on. That as a kind of as organisation, artist, and in with that climate sector view. I'm just going to get a drink of water. Thank you, Emma.
Sure. I mean, I can talk a bit to what Leeds 2023's approach is in relation to addressing climate change, and if helpful, I can also reflect a bit more on some of the voluntary roles that I do. I just wanted to say I'm like absolutely fascinated by the 2 projects that have just been described as well. I think what's really exciting about responding to climate change within an arts context is how able we are to interpret or translate or communicate things that are either often invisible or less tangible. So like the sounds of a tree, or the way in which we might think about an ecology of a forest. I think that these are all really helpful and really useful contributions to climate justice, because often it's those less tangible connections that we have to the planet that are the pieces that are missing from the work that the scientists and the researchers and all of those people who are creating solutions in response to climate change can't do. And I think it's great to hear about two really incredible contributions from that sense. Leeds 2023 made a commitment, even before I'd started in post back in January, to being a green year of culture. And I think that that's one of the reasons why I was particularly excited to come and work with them. They have prescribed to this notion of a triple bottom line, which is basically, if you've not come across that before, it's where you think about your responsibility as an organization in relation to people, planet, and profit. And that's the way in which we've started to think about how we, as a time-limited organization, because in 2024 we don't exist anymore, might contribute towards some of the work that's already existing and some of the best practice that's already happening in the city and in the region and nationally in response to climate change. There's just something that I often try and reflect on when I'm thinking about this in terms of what a year of culture can do towards climate justice, is the luxury actually that we've got at 2023 in the fact that we're starting from scratch. We're a new organisation, and the fact that we're also only here for a really restricted period of time means that we can really think about the impacts that we might have and what the legacy will be, in a way that I think a lot of existing arts organisations or festivals or independents can't do. So the way in which we approach climate justice within our work is really around, where does the best practice exist already that we can amplify? And then where are the gaps? And that goes across all of our programming. We're not trying to replicate existing things that already happen here that are really wonderful. We're trying to work out how we can add value to those and also address where some of the missing elements might be. And I think in a city like Leeds, which did make a commitment to being net zero by 2030 when it declared a climate emergency, and also where existing networks like Sustainable Arts in Leeds are already really thinking about what the cultural industry's responsibilities are. Where we've come to with it is what we can really do is use the platform that we have as a way to communicate with as wide a reaching and diverse audience as possible, and bring lots of different experiences and perspectives of and responses to climate change within that, because that's what we really think our skill sets are as producers and as artists, and that's quite a big contribution that we can make to the city, and more beyond that to the region and nationally. And I think that actually what Cheryl and Hassan have both described are really great examples of that. You know, we can really think about a year as an opportunity to change people's perspectives, introduce perhaps new knowledge for different communities that we might be working with, just purely because of the scale of platform that we've got. We've got you know, commitments to reaching at least 75% of the population. We're going to be working with every school child in the city. These are really massive opportunities and contributions that we can make.
Yeah, it's great to hear that work. And I think I'm currently creating a project with Mind the Gap in Bradford that looks at how and I suppose this is where I want to go next with this question, because it's all well and good us saying like what we need to do to keep our audience engaged in this theme of climate change and this subject of climate change. But what I find quite difficult as an artist as part of that is that the conversation around climate change does feel quite middle class. How can we open up the conversation as artists, as cultural organisations, to make sure that people aren't being left out, and to make sure that they know it matters to them as well? Because it does, doesn't it? It does feel a very middle class conversation that's happening. How do we engage those other voices? Cheryl, you've unmuted, so I'm going to go to you first.
I don't know if it's a middle class conversation. I wouldn't describe myself as middle class. certainly I think that there is a differentiation between, you know, how much work, for instance, is going on about climate change in care homes, you know, and that's very, very low. So I think there is sort of an age divide on who we feel. And I hear a lot of the time people saying the climate change, you know, crisis, let's focus on young people because they are our future. Well, yes, that is true, but the crisis is not in the future. The crisis is in the now. So we need to look at all of us in the now. And how I have been engaging, and I'm slowly building audience through life story, connecting the work I do to aspects of life, to aspects of my life story that other people in my age group might identify with, and above. So, because what I found, one of the things I found is like, the more political, you know, like, you know, there's some fantastic footage of the rainforests of Wales on the Coed Cadw website and on the Woodland Trust website and on all the kind of nature website. Beautiful, incredible, and everyone goes, "That's lovely, nature's beautiful, isn't it? Right, let's use some paper and plastic and, you know." So it's like beautifulness doesn't change behavior. So then you think, okay, look, you know, so let's have a conversation about the reality of what's going on. That doesn't seem to be changing behavior quick enough either. So I've tried to take this kind of different approach, which is like reaching out emotionally. So I think because in the arts, we are able to reach people emotionally. We're able to climb inside people, inside their own stories, their own life history with nature. And that's how I'm working. The moment, if I look at the stats, when I look at my statistics on which posts have had the most engagement, the moment I make a piece that says, that's overtly political, I hardly get any views at all on Facebook. But when I talk about a piece, when I talk about this oak tree and how it relates to me in my life and when I was little, and you know, when it relates to a life story, I get hundreds of engagements. So it's gauging gauging what kind of approach, all the different approaches we need. We need political approaches, we need to show the beauty of nature, but we also need this middle ground where we're reaching to people emotionally. They're connecting with their emotional connection with the environment, and the arts is just fantastic for that. So I don't know if that answers you, but it was what was inside me when you spoke.
No, I think it's great to hear that passion that's coming through. Hassan, what about for you? How can we engage people in this conversation that might feel left out of it?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing that I come from a public engagement background, right? And I think that one of the things that we sometimes do as artists sometimes I have to keep in mind as an artist is fundamentally understand who is the art for, who's the audience that it intends to reach, right? And how do you intend to reach them? And that needs to be at the cornerstone. And I'm really up and I'm really down to the co-creating model of creating arts, working with communities that are going to be consuming the art finally. But I think if to go back to your question about is it a middle class issue, I think there's definitely an element of people in society who have the privilege to be able to wake up in the morning and say that climate change is the existential threat to my life. I think that quote is loaded with privilege. That's my personal opinion. I think if you dissect climate injustice, you are able to see that underlying, you will not be able to get climate justice unless you have class justice, you have social justice, you have racial justice. I mean, let's talk about the realities, right? The reality is, in Sheffield, for example, when it floods, it's the areas which have the predominantly working class communities that flood. In terms of the communities that are going to be most impacted by climate change, globally, it's people in the global south. And in terms of the social justice, in terms of the communities that most need the research and innovation that to help address the impact of climate change, they're not given access to that research and innovation. So it absolutely is an issue that needs to be kind of made more accessible, but it's not. But I think what we have to understand is art itself doesn't change the world. Art, it has a medium, it has a role in playing to allowing people to understand, raise awareness. It allows people to care. It may trigger action, but in itself, it doesn't change the world. I think it's people who change the world fundamentally. And I think art can play a role in inspiring that. And I guess also, I've come across a lot of forms of art which talk about climate change. And I think that sometimes there's something that I've been hearing a lot about talk about climate anxiety, and the idea that sometimes you consume a piece of art about climate change and it leaves you feeling really bad. And if you're really feeling like, oh my God, the world is really messed up. And I think there's a role to play in giving people hope. And I think the understanding that actually, you know, things can change, things will change, things can get better. And I think also I did a bit of community research in underserved communities. Prior to this project, I'm doing a play about climate change actually. And one of the interesting conversations that came out of that is that there was this acceptance of the world will be here, the planet will be here, was here before me, and it'll be here after me. But I know that my role is to really, really care for the people I love and the people around me and my community. And I think that really resonated with me in the sense of community is not just people, it's also your environment. You know, it's the tree across the road from you. It's the birds up nest in that tree. It's the fox that comes to your garden. That becomes your community. And I think that when you start thinking, if everyone felt that way, then, you know, individually, street by street, road by road, city by city, you know, you can make an impact.
I absolutely agree with you there. And I think, you know, the moment we both had, Hassan, I was listening to you speak about that awakening almost we had to realizing there were sounds that we hadn't heard before when we put our hearing aids on, and it kind of deepened our connection to nature, that sort of awakening to nature. I mean, I think that's what I've tried to build in my work, is like for people to have that awakening, because they almost have to realize that love and that importance of the environment. Their environment, the environment. They have to realize that importance within themselves before they will make change. People can't be told to make change. They have to feel it from within. And that's where I think the arts has a really significant role, because it does reach within. And I also agree with you that a lot of that people don't want to be made to feel bad. You know, we want, because that won't evoke change. We need to make, well, sorry, not we, I can't talk for everyone, but for me personally, I feel I want to make art that makes people want to make change.
Great. Yeah. Make art, make that change. Thank you. Aidan has put in the chat that climate change disproportionately impacts on the most marginalized and at-risk communities. Disabled, poor, pre-existing conditions, asylum seekers, refugees, etc. We just need to engage them in an honest dialogue based in equity and justice. Also needs to be relevant, not all about electric cars and recycling. When you can't feed your kids, there are different decisions to be made. And I think that's really relevant, that last bit around the priorities that people have. So Emma, I'm going to come to you on this. What part are organisations playing to make sure that everybody is able to access this conversation?
Yeah, I think the points that Aidan's making are really valid. I reflect often on an area of Leeds that I used to do a lot of work in before I was at Leeds 2023. It's called Lincoln Green. And I used to chair a neighbourhood forum there, and something that happened that for me was a prime example of a lack of communication and understanding was the council had led on a great initiative to create a lot more cycle routes. And what they hadn't quite anticipated was the response to that in terms of the disruption for some neighbourhoods, particularly neighbourhoods just on the outskirts of the city centre. And at this particular forum meeting, something that really came to the fore was people were quite angry, and quite rightly, in my opinion, that suddenly an enormous amount of roadworks had appeared in their neighbourhood for these cycle routes that actually they wouldn't use. These were cycle routes for the middle classes. These were cycle routes for people in the suburban parts of the city to access the city centre for their jobs. And if anything, it was making the people in that particular neighbourhood who did work in the city centre too's lives more difficult, because it was adding to the length of walk that they normally would do, because their usual access route was no longer available to them. And I think about that often, because I think that we are under such time pressures with a lot of the solutions that we're trying to build at a local level, because we've got these deadlines that are very real deadlines, that there's a lack of care or consistency sometimes in the way that they are then those solutions are then implemented. And it's of no surprise to me that there are challenges around communicating some of those solutions or communicating things around behavioural changes in a way that seems fair and equitable for the people receiving that, when a lot of this is really, really closely connected to other existing industries that also face challenges when it comes to class barriers. So research and academia is really heavily involved because they have expertise in these areas with some of these solutions around climate change. Now, I think it's safe to say not all research institutions or universities are brilliant at co-creating with communities or thinking about community engagement. So I don't think it's unsurprising from that point of view. I guess in terms of what organisations or individuals can do to address some of that, I think that there needs to be more thought put into how to create personal, tangible connections to the problem. So a lot of us are quite used to seeing images that feel very distant, that communicate climate change, like polar bears. I'm trying to think of some classics. And actually wouldn't necessarily know that perhaps they live in the most polluted part of the city, or it's safer for their children to play indoors than it is outdoors. And I think that making some of those connections in a way that's also about building confidence for some of those communities to then respond themselves to what those solutions should be is often a missing link because of, again, the time pressures. So rather than trying to incite fear or a culture of fear around the subject, trying to create space for people to actually come together to respond themselves. So what would the people in Lincoln Green do? These cycle routes are being created, but what would they like to do now that they know what the statistics and the data is and the information is about their particular neighbourhood and some of the challenges that they might need to address? And the other thing I'd just say too that I think is particularly untapped in the UK and in the West more broadly across Europe specifically is we have very minimal connections to the international dialogue around climate change and climate justice, which is surprising because actually when you think about a city like Leeds, again, we speak 170 languages in Leeds. So there are international connections that run very deep there with the world. And actually being able to, again, communicate those impacts that sometimes do feel further away in a way that, again, creates that personal connection is another untapped opportunity. So spaces for artists to come together from different international contexts, again, to respond to some of these challenges, I think is another route by which we could think about building that piece of relevancy and building that confidence within some of our audiences to be able to come up with solutions themselves. And I'll just say one of the projects that we've been developing recently, which is called Tech for the Public Good, is about bringing together, it's a project with the British Council and the Frontiers Institute at the University of Leeds. That's about bringing together artists, activists, people who work in all sorts of different jobs, teachers, librarians, whatever, alongside researchers, academics, engineers, and people involved in seeking solutions towards massive global issues like climate change. And already through that project, what we understand is that climate change might manifest in a different way, but the impact often is still felt the same, and you can create that emotional connection just by creating space for some of those people to come together in a room and talk about it and share their skill sets and experiences. So I'd like to see more space for that, and I'd like to see more space for artists particularly, and cultural workers particularly, to be involved in some of these solutions that might not necessarily result in an artwork, but also gives more motivation for artists to see what their role within some of those solutions can be.
Great. Hassan, over to you.
Yeah, I was just going to echo that was fantastic examples that Emma's given. And one of the interesting things that we've done with here is that we've done a community tour in those kind of areas, like the Lincoln Green type areas. And we found that actually people were very surprised that art was happening in those areas to begin with. They can't quite understand the concept that, you've been paid to create this thing. Like, this is your job, and they're like, well, it's not kind of a job. It's, yeah. But it's, and I think building agency in those communities for them people to understand that they can also create these arts. And I mean, it's a wonderful story. It's like the mention of like the idea leads a city with, the UK has hundreds of languages now too, right? And it's, it's the idea that a Somali community would be telling me about, how the sounds of the sea really resonated with them. The Ahmed story was so relevant to them. The Pakistani community, 70% of the Pakistani community in the UK comes from an area, a region in Kashmir called Mirpur and Daryar, displaced by the Mangla Dam due to decisions made by government to change the landscape. And so there's high kind of resonance of it. Yeah, I can relate to my home flooding and having to move. But not understanding that actually there's two parts of that. There's a part of you can create art to kind of explore what it felt to be a community on that. But also there's some, and I think this is where an academic context comes in, right? Is that there's explorations that what the notion of academia and where the solutions of climate change should come from needs to be broken down. Solutions can come from the people who are being affected by it most. They should have the agency to understand that, the research and the observations and the solutions that they feel are applicable have just as much grandeur and repertoire as the research, as a researcher sitting in Sheffield or Leeds University, right? And building that kind of level playing field to make people understand that, climate change is something that they have agency to combat, and they have the right to present solutions for in their own area. It is incredibly important. And if art has a small role to play in doing that, then we absolutely should.
Yes, I'm with you. With the Walk 19 project, where we recreated in sound the walks of the older people, it actually became like a heritage project, because lots of members of the community then started restoring the walks because they'd become overgrown or uncared for, and it engaged the community in the environment through the stories of the older people in the care homes. And so it sort of bred its own connectivity. Going back to what Nikki said about at the beginning about whether or not the conversations are middle class, I think what we're saying is that actually the decision making is quite a middle class. There's middle class decision making, and it's how we can adapt the arts to enable a more collective voice within that decision making process. So that we're doing work that enables people to have a voice, but then what happens to that voice? So I think when I started my main commission, I was talking about raising awareness, but raising awareness isn't enough on its own. I remember many years ago, I trained as a nurse, and I was working in what was called at the time a lockup ward in a learning disability hospital before the law changed. And while I was there, the law changed and the doors were opened and people were allowed to go outside, but nobody did, because they'd been behind the door for so long they didn't know that you could open it, or they didn't know if they belonged on the other side. And really, it's one thing saying to people, you are able now to have a voice, but actually if people have never had a voice, they actually need support to be able to reach that point where they can contribute. And I think the arts has a fantastic role in enabling people a voice through different mediums and different platforms.
And I agree with that. Through the project that I'm doing with Mind the Gap, it's that thing around talking to the artists. What's their understanding of climate change? assisting them with that understanding, and then getting to think around what are they able to do in their everyday lives, and what the impact can be on to other people they know. And it's quite interesting of what, you know, some conversations have come up that we've never been exposed to climate change due to being in kind of SEND schools, to people that, you know, care for us don't tell us about it because they don't want to worry us. So it's around actually how can we then engage people in the conversation to make everybody feel that they're part of it. And I think on that note, I would love to open up this conversation to the people that are here in this Zoom room. If anybody has got a question, please put it in the chat, or you can raise your Zoom hand and ask a question. It would be great to know if there are any burning questions out there in the audience, an opportunity to open up this conversation. Just going to scroll through my Zoom screen and see if I can see anybody. If not, then I feel like we've answered it all and nobody has any questions. They're all going to go out and make fantastic art and talk to people and understand where everybody's coming from. Any questions out there? It doesn't look like there are any questions. Oh, here we go. From Joe Verron. What's the approach for people who deny there is an issue? And this is quite interesting, isn't it? Those climate deniers. Who would like to take this one? What's the approach for people who deny there is an issue? Go on, Emma.
Well, the first question I've got is that people who like, what am I trying to say? Is it, well, I guess the first thing I'd ask in terms of where to put your energy is it people who have a position of power that could really influence a huge amount of change in relation to the crisis, or is it people who, for whatever reason, don't believe it's an issue, and that's more to do about their day-to-day experiences or the way in which they interact with the planet? Because I think it changes then whether or not you need to spend an awful lot of time trying to convince them that there is an issue or there is a problem or they do have a role to play within it. And I say that for a couple of reasons. The first is I think that sometimes people deny there's an issue because it's so overwhelming sometimes to think about what their response to it could be. And so in that circumstance, I often just tend to focus on, well, what's the realm of influence that they might have in terms of what they can do about climate change, because everyone's is going to be different. And then how much do I need to push the point based on that? But if it's someone who is a politician or runs an organization that is having a massive detrimental impact on the planet, or these types of things, or cumulatively, you know, the whole creative and cultural sector coming together to try and actually improve their own footprint, for example, I think they're different approaches and they require slightly different amounts of energy. It's just my own personal opinion.
Right. Where we put that energy where it counts, isn't it? And next up is, sorry, I'm going to jump on, Cheryl. There's just another question come through. Is there one piece of advice you'd give for the approach to a new climate justice art project if we would go to specific communities as you both have? I think that's a prime question for Cheryl and Hassan. So what's a piece of advice you'd give for the approach to a new climate justice art project?
Listen. Listen to the people, listen to the community. If you're working with a specific group, put your agenda to one side and listen. And ownership, you know, empower ownership, empower a platform for people to take hold of their own ownership. And be open. I think perhaps as artists we go in thinking this is what we're going in to do, and actually we need to be open to what the community wants, because once people have ownership, then, you know, like we don't want to go in and create art and then when we've gone, nothing is left. Sustainability, we need to create something that's sustainable, is about empowerment and ownership for the people that we're working with.
Brilliant.
To leave a legacy, you know.
Great, thank you, Cheryl. Hassan, have you anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think that put it quite beautifully. But be really honest about what you're hoping to achieve. I mean, if you're going in because you want to create a theatre show that's going to go to the National Theatre, then just be very honest that the communities that you may be engaging with may never see that show. And is that the most useful thing and impactful thing that they need? I think also don't complicate it. It's, you know, art is very subjective, and it's the idea that, you know, there's a lot of things that can be art. Everything can be art. And I think sometimes keeping it really simple is the best way to keep it really accessible. And the best way to keep it really, really actually get so many people engaged and so many people feel that they can get involved. So yeah, and yeah, share and talk and listen a lot, because I think there's some real gold dust and gold nuggets and diamonds in communities that don't traditionally make art or don't feel that they're making art. When someone comes around with an opportunity for them to get involved, they have a lot to give, and so you'll really benefit and grow as an artist by working with them.
Great, I hope that helps there, Carol, to listen, to empower, to provide a platform, to be open, don't overcomplicate it, and to share and to talk. There's a very big question coming to the chat, and I know we've only got 2 minutes left, but I am going to ask it because I think this is really important and something we are all struggling with. I know us at Dada, we've gone on our carbon literacy training, and to fully understand the impact everything we do, even how sending an email can have a massive impact on our planet. You add attachments to an email, it like trebles our carbon footprint. So Aidan wants to know, as artists, how can we make work about climate change without contributing to the problem across the life of the work, from the idea to it being shown? It's a big question, but, you know, for me, it is that thing of thinking, well, how are our artists even getting to the place? Are there kind of hybrid vehicles to bring people? It's all of that, isn't it?
Yeah, so I've kind of made a lot of the decisions. I mean, I'm working with the rainforests of Wales in a declining area, so I don't want to contribute to that. So a lot of the decisions I made about my residencies, rather than travel there, that I went and stayed at the forest for long periods of time to cut down the travel, worked in partnership with Coed Cadw to be planting trees. You can work in partnership with an organisation to come to some level of not necessarily carbon zero, because that's quite difficult, but that it's difficult to calculate, not difficult to do, but it's difficult to calculate as an individual what your footprint actually is. But that you can work in partnership. I'm working in a partnership with Coed Cadw, the Woodland Trust, Snowdonia Trust, the Wildlife Society, the RSPB, the National Botanic Garden of Wales, you know, bringing in partners who can advise me on how we can reduce the carbon, you know, the carbon footprint of the project. And also then any products that I'm making, I'm working with organisations that have carbon zero policies. And a lot of those are actually partnered up with organisations that do planting to counteract, or they use solar powered energy. So, you know, you have to be conscious and mindful about each of the decisions you make in the production, in the process, and personally. You know, if you're making work that's asking people to think more radically about their footprint, then you have to be thinking more radically about your own. Yeah.
Completely. Emma, is there anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I guess it's the ongoing tension, isn't it, of all of this. And I think, you know, it's something that I'm really conscious of, because, you know, a year of culture falls into that category of mega event. And actually, when you start to look at the impact of that, it suddenly becomes really difficult to see the wood for the trees. I didn't do that deliberately, by the way. I guess there's a few things that we're talking about at the moment as we build our sustainable action plan here that I could share. The first is that The recent Season for Change programme, which completes at COP26, has an incredible volume of resources on it, including resources developed by artists and talks and workshops and events that you can watch. And I'd really recommend looking at those. The second is obviously the work of Julie's Bicycle has been long-term, cross-sector, and is incredibly valuable. So if you haven't had a look at those yet, please do. The third thing is something that I'm looking at specifically at the moment is what tools do we have available to us in the creative and cultural industries that we can already adapt. So we don't need a brand new solution to the issue. So one of the things that we'll be looking at 2023 is carbon budgeting across the year. So how do we approach that as part of the same way? How do we manage it in the same way that we manage our money? And how do we make that part of the day-to-day approach to programming and to delivering events and activities? It's an experiment, so I don't know the answers to that yet, but it'll be an interesting one. And then the fourth thing I guess I'd say is try and find out if there are existing local networks that you can become part of. Like, we're very fortunate to have Sustainable Arts in Leeds, and they might also be able to provide some support for that. But the other thing to say is, and this is specifically a terminology thing, but it's helpful, you need to make a personal decision about your work as to whether you want to think about being net zero or zero carbon, because they'll present two very different pathways, and I think that's something that only you can decide.
Brilliant.
I know we're near the end there, but just to say, Emma, what I really liked, wrapped in what you were saying there, how do we make carbon a currency?
Hassan, you?
Yeah, I'd wrap it up really quickly. I think do your best and understand that, you know, we are individuals and we are all on a journey, and you know, every project, hopefully we can become more sustainable by taking learnings from it. I said, don't let it drag you down. You know, if you need to send that email, send that email. If you need to print the script, print the script, because in the grand scheme of things, you are an individual and you are trying your best. And we know that individual actions play a role, but in the global perspective of climate change, it's going to take more than individual actions to make a significant impact to the direction the planet is going. But we will do our best as individuals. And just go and create art. Make the best art you can possibly do.
And when it gets too much, just breathe.
Brilliant. Thank you all very much. I loved having this conversation with you all. It is all around sharing, listening. Don't put it all on your shoulders to solve it. You know, we are that, like Hassan said, we are that small part of that wheel, but those little bits that we can do will always help. Thank you to Cheryl, Hassan and Emma, to Natasha and Lauren, and the team here at Unlimited for having us to talk this afternoon. Thank you very much.
Before we jump into the amazing works and artists that we have here today, just some gentle reminders around kind of access and how this session will work. For anybody that joined us midway through our panel earlier, if you use BSL, please pin the BSL interpreters to your screen for live conversations. Our interpreters today are Lauren and Natasha. If Lauren and Natasha want to just give us a quick wave. Thank you. And you can pin them by hovering over their video and clicking on that pin icon. Thanks to Ben for providing the digital production for today. In terms of, we have captions, so you can click on the CC button along the bottom bar. And we are recording this session as part of our access offer. So let us know if you would like a copy of the recording afterwards in the chat. It's a relaxed event, so if at any point you'd like to walk around, make yourself a cup of tea, take a break, lay down, please feel free to do so. We are having breaks between parts of this event for the captioners and the BSL interpreters. And just want to say a big thank you to everybody that's made it so far today's session. We've been sharing, or we will be sharing, a link to Aidan Mosby's I Was Naked Smelling of Rain. It's already come through on some of your emails, but we will pop it in the chat as well. And please stick around for our pudding session later for a chance to digest what you've seen. I will now pass over to the wonderful Jo Verrant, who will be leading us with the picture mix. Thanks, Jo.
I'm very glad it's a relaxed event because I'm home alone with the dog, so it might get more relaxed than you imagine if the dog starts playing up. I love Picture Mix. I love to see work being created before it's finished, often when there's that chance to have that conversation with an artist about the work they created. So I'm delighted to be able to host it. And we've got 4 fantastic projects to find out a little bit about today. So the process is we're going to watch a quick video by one artist and then of another project, and then I'll have a chat with both of those, and then we'll do 2 more videos and then have another chat. So the chat bits, absolutely, my questions, your questions, load them in the chat, pop on video, we can sort that out. But we do pitches by video because then the artist can actually reuse that content. It can go on websites, it can go out to other people who haven't been able to make it today. So we're going to begin with the fabulous Rachel Young, who's pitching for their project, Our Bodies, an Island. So I'm going to turn off my video and we'll see theirs.
My name is Rachel Young. I am a neurodivergent artist and writer. My practice exists on the boundaries of live art, text, movement, activism, and neurodiversity. My work explores the multiplicities of lived experience. I try to hold space for those at the intersections of numerous identities, championing and centering alternative perspectives. My recent work includes contributions to the Royal Court's Living newspaper, Her Story at Brighton Festival, and my white best friend also at the Royal Court, as well as curating and hosting Blacklash, a series of informal discussions providing Black artists with a chance to reflect on their practice and position in the wider arts sector, and Stomachful, a publication centering Black queer joy and desire. My latest major work was First Trap, an audio-sensory experience exploring climate crisis experienced by audiences in their own homes, in their own baths. I'm here today to talk to you about Our Bodies, an Island, which will act as a sister piece to First Trap. Bodies will be an exploration of the correlation between climate and racial justice. The work seeks to investigate the embodied experiences of global majority communities who are the hardest hit by the current climate emergency, yet do the least to affect it. Continuing on from First Trap, this work will continue my preoccupation with water as a means through which to connect to self, others, and the natural world. Bodies will take place in swimming pools, bringing audiences together in these local and community-orientated spaces, transforming them into a space of resistance and escapism. Over the last year, I have been researching and learning about different potential XR technologies. The area that feels most accessible to me at this time and also offers up the opportunity to enhance my current practice are advances in sound and visual language. Bodies is my most ambitious piece to date. This experimental performance installation will use projection, 360 video, and 3D sound. I will fuse first-hand lived experiences with speculative fiction to create a cinematic experience that pushes audiences to consider a wider, more inclusive picture of what the future could look like. At the same time, it will provide an intimate communion of reflection and collective listening. The creation and production of this work are supported by Unlimited. A crucial strand of the work that needs further support is the engagement strand. It's really important to me that my work reaches those who are most impacted by its theme. I will hold a series of pilot workshops at Body and Soul, an organisation for people impacted by HIV. The majority of the participants share diasporic experiences and are impacted by the climate injustices in sub-Saharan Africa. I would like to use the pilot as an opportunity to develop the workshop methodology. After this, I would like to look towards a wider rollout. I'm looking for partnership support for the development of this work in the community and social healthcare spaces. This piece holds access at the centre and considers the different pathways needed to support diverse audiences to enter the world of the work. I want to provide a range of access points through the development of 360 video and water sonics. I'm also looking for additional investment to increase the production value of this area of the work. Thank you so much for listening.
Wow. I want to invest already. It's really bizarre with Unlimited because we don't have any personal say in what's invested, but I'm absolutely sure that that's going to help generate additional resources for such a vital project. But before I get too carried away and ask all my questions that I want to ask about that work, we've got our second pitch to see, which is Cheryl, who was talking earlier on the panel session, who's going to pitch for a particular project called H2O.
You see, built within the earth is this incredible water recycling system called trees, forests, woods. Because even just an average sized tree recycles about 150 gallons of water every week. Just one tree. So imagine what a forest does. Now the problem is that we have cut down vast areas of this water pump system, whilst at the same time creating climate change that melts the ice caps and creates more water. So, it's not rocket science. We're creating more water and removing our pumping system. So right now, we are facing a crisis. I hear people saying it all the time. Oh yes, that's the climate crisis. Well, it's time to take action, because if we don't take action, we won't just be having a climate crisis. We'll be in a state of emergency. My name is Cheryl Beer. I'm a hearing impaired environmental sound artist, and I work with the biorhythms and the visualization of sound within the natural world to notate music led by the environment, so that we might listen more deeply in this hour of distress. Because we're not separate from nature. The longer I spend with trees, with the seas, with the oceans, the longer I spend on the forest floor, the more I come to realise nature is not just beautiful, it's who we are, it's what we are. And somehow we've lost the connection. It hasn't always been like that. Like, I'm in the Celtic rainforests of Wales at the moment. And the Celts, all those thousands of years ago, knew more about their connection to the natural world than we do now, although I think we actually do know. We put it to the backs of our heads. The Celts devised a language called with letters that were entirely based on the qualities, connections and names of trees. They used a tree alphabet. I mean, I find that incredible. Because the Celts are our ancestors. Their blood is in our blood. Their DNA has come through the bloodlines of who we are right now, today. And there was a time in our bloodlines when we communicated with each other through a language of trees. So we knew that we weren't separate from them. Even our names were constructed from letters that symbolized the cultural significance of trees. And I don't know about you, but we need somehow to remember. We need to dig down into our own DNA, into our own psyche, and remember that we are nature. And so when we abuse the environment, we are abusing ourselves. When we hurt the natural world, we are hurting ourselves. We've separated ourselves from it. And it's time to reconnect. And that's the core of my work. That's my passion. That's why I get up every day and dedicate my life to collating nature narratives, carving sound sculptures, and composing music led by the natural world, so that we might hear her in her hour of distress, just as she hears us in ours.
Wow, thank you. So can I invite both Rachel and Cheryl onto the screen? I can see Cheryl there. I'm just hanging on for Rachel, seeing she's with us today. Yay, brilliant. I remembered at the beginning that I forgot to just reintroduce myself. My name's Jo Verrant. I'm senior producer at Unlimited. I'm a white 50+ tending towards the plump woman with blue hair sitting in my lounge at home. So I'll just do introductions to each of us. I use she, her pronouns. So Rachel, do you want to go first?
Yeah, hi. Sorry, I'm Rachel. I use they, them pronouns. Black British. I'm wearing some gold framed square glasses, and I have locks that are tied up into a bun on top of my head.
Fantastic. Cheryl, do you want to reintroduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Cheryl Beer. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a 56-year-old white woman with long brown hair, erring on the wrong side of plump, and I wear 2 hearing aids. I'm sitting in my office here in West Wales.
There's no wrong side of plump. No wrong side of plump. Right, that's where I am on that. Both of your work, both of those videos had hairs, made the hairs on my arm stand up. because they both did something, and both the projects do something that is about intimacy and also about scale. And I'm really interested in how that happens, how you can create something that talks directly to a person and makes an individual really connect with this vital subject, but at scale so that it can reach many people. So Rachel, first of all, can I ask, in terms of the bath piece, which I think is a brilliant idea, I spend a lot of time in the bath, water is one of my salvations, what was the impact of that, and how easy was it to reach a range of different people through something that was packaged in such an intimate form?
Well, I guess the plan is that piece of work, it kind of toured in London. I get that was kind of like a pilot tour for it, and then it will go on to tour next year, kind of more widely. But people were getting in contact from all over the place, literally being oh, can we do this work? So I feel I don't know, I don't know, people were really intrigued by it, and it's quite nice to kind of just have something that's something that you can do in your own time, but also kind of be immersed in this kind of really great soundscape, but it's in kind of in your own home. And I guess think about your personal connections to kind of to water, which is in all of us. I just kept thinking about that a lot, by the idea that the water goes down a plug and then goes and is something else for someone else somewhere else. But I guess that was a kind of a project that kind of happened in isolation, and this project now, Bodies, is about kind of being able to reach communities still kind of where they're at.
Is it aimed at the people who use the swimming baths at the moment, or is there a wider arts kind of audience and a travelling audience to reconnect them with swimming even?
I'm hoping that it will be a bit of both, because I feel definitely in the swimming pool there's going to be people that won't have ever experienced any of my work or work like this before, but then there's also an opportunity for people who, I don't know, are more interested in I don't know, experimental artworks to kind of between in that place, and hopefully that will foster some sort of conversations between a diverse range of people. That's my hope anyway.
And Cheryl, with yours, obviously there's a lot of, anybody who goes through the forests can potentially connect. But how else are you connecting out to a wider audience through that work, through your work generally? Oh, I think you're on mute.
There's always one, isn't there? So I'm working on my Canacoy's Song of the Trees main commission with Unlimited, based in the Celtic rainforests of Wales at the moment. And that work is reconnecting the four forests. And earlier on in the year, I was asked to be part of a conference called Everything Change, and I heard the term global, which I thought was a really good term. It's how do you take local work and make it global? And so I'm kind of trying to embed that in the work. So initially how I thought my sound sculpture would be shared is through a QR code that will go into 100 different international events across the globe. And that's still happening. I'm working in partnership with Wales Arts International to make that happen. But the film that I made for you, for instance, last week, this H2O film, Wales Arts International have asked me if they can play that at COP26 at their stand. So, you have to kind of be open to saying yes a lot of, it almost feels to me that once you step into what you're meant to be doing, paths kind of, obviously other paths close, but lots of paths open, and it's being open to feeling those. And yes, there is going to be this international connection to the work through the QR code. It's going to be a virtual sound sculpture, but it's being launched at the National Botanic Garden of Wales, which is close to where I live.
And we've brought in 6 saplings from the rainforests of Wales that have been nurtured in the Snowdonia National Trust. And they're going to be canocoid oak trees, which will form part of the Arboretum Woods of the World project at the National Botanic Garden Wales, which also spreads out globally, but it is part of a global project, but is a local environmental project. And then also during that work, Coed Cadw then said, well, hang on, we'd like to have a physical trail of this, of these sounds through the forest. Would that be possible? So now we're looking at a QR coded trail through the actual forest. So I almost came backwards. I had this international vision of QR coding out, which is still happening, but it's coming back into local, you know, Wales-based organisations who then have their own distribution globally. So
I was going to say, I hope you've got a good spreadsheet with that map on.
Because I can't just keep doing this, can I?
it's just a lot there.
Yes, yeah.
I just wanted to ask, Rachel, in relation to your work, obviously there's the climate justice, racial justice angle on it. And so in terms of spreading that work out, there must also be a desire to, one, ensure the right people are being supported and empowered through that, but also the placement of the work is in the right way so that it doesn't get misowned, if that makes sense. How does that play out within your work?
I think that's one of the reasons why I'm not, you know, why I want it to kind of have to happen like in local community, like in the center of it, like the leisure centre, because otherwise if it gets shown at like really bougie festivals all the time, that's not really, I'm not saying that's not the audience for the work, it is, but that's not the only audience for the work, and that's not the piece that I'm trying to make. So there's a lot of kind of work now thinking about like where are the right places to kind of share the work, and who can kind of put us in contact with, I guess, like different community groups that might already be using the leisure centre, or just also might have some experience of the impact of the current climate, I'm gonna say catastrophe, but yeah, and have already and I suppose we don't think about like how that's happening in the global south, and how that affects people that are kind of like moving to, or I mean, not anymore, they won't be, but we're moving to this country. Yeah.
I mean, we were thinking about just that who audiences are and how they get reached, and when we pitch, quite often we pitch for cash because that's the currency that we're most used to working in, but actually connections in relation to both these projects, connections seem just as valuable. Actually, without the right connections, the work isn't going to reach those right places. So if there are people watching or watch this at a different point who have suggestions for those connector pieces, that's just presumably as valuable as cold hard cash.
Yeah,
absolutely, yeah. I mean, one of the core aims of Canocoid was to raise awareness about the rainforests of Wales, both nationally and internationally, because even people here in Wales didn't know we have rainforests. I think a lot of people think of rainforests as being somewhere other than Wales. So, but as I'm doing the work and raising awareness, it's kind of that I want to do more than just raise awareness. It's about making change, you know, making social change. So there's been a shift in me and my work as an artist, you know, as I'm going along. But having said that, cold hard cash is very lovely, and I really love because when I made this, my main commission is to make a virtual soundscape, and one of the core reasons for that was because I think as a hearing impaired sound artist, I didn't have the confidence to say even the word performance, but that's shifting and changing for me as I'm doing the work. And obviously I performed and toured all of my life up until I lost my hearing, and it was it was the shock, I think, and my main commission has become more than what it is. It's become a transition and a journey back to self in a lot of ways. I never thought I'd be notating music when I first applied, and I never thought I'd be thinking about how to make a carbon neutral performance from the work. And I'd really love to secure a partner that would want to help me to play back those the piano music you heard in that piece, by the way, is actually the biorhythms of a tree. So, you've just been listening to the biorhythms of a tree translated into digital sound and then notated into music. So it's tree-led music from the rainforests of Wales. And I want to play that back to the trees. I want to compose a piece that's all of the trees and play it back to them so they get to hear it. And I think that would be the most amazing performance, with a cyclist doing the electricity, and, and the trees and us are all listening together. I mean, I feel quite emotional about it, but I don't have a partner for that. So if there's anybody here that would be interested in how we might make that so, I'd really love to hear from you. If you know somebody that might, or if you're good at cycling.
Definitely cold hard cash. I've just had a message in from Harry going, have I invited questions from the audience? Audience, please tell us your questions. Put them in the chat and we can come to you. Otherwise, I'll just keep asking mine because I've always got so many. Both of you, Cheryl, then you just mentioned self, and Rachel, I know within your work, care of self, and self is a really important element. And it started to be touched on a little bit within the panel discussion before. Pitching, looking outwards, context, all of that is a very giving and kind of, how do you keep yourself in the center of the work, and how do you look after yourself in that process? So again, Rachel first and then Cheryl, and I'll see if anybody else has got any other questions too.
That's a very good question. I guess for me generally, it's about trying to just work at a pace that suits me. I get very enthusiastic, and my ADHD makes me kind of like want to do. But I'm trying really hard to like just be patient and allow, like, even with the connections that I'm making with people with the work, just allow them to happen and not feeling super pressured. And I think I've developed developing a good self-care methodology that kind of sits around my work for myself and for all of the people that I'm working with, so that like burnout doesn't become a thing. Yeah.
And what about you, Cheryl? How do you keep self at the center, and how do you look after yourself?
I think oddly they're sort of two almost feel like two different questions, because emotionally being in nature a lot of the time is very grounding, and this my main commission enabled me for the first time to have a hearing assistant, which has been just amazing, because of the worries that I have about, when I'm out in the forest, is a tree going to fall, is an animal going to come out at me, is there a person here, is there a car coming through on the track, all of those worries that draw me away from the work. Somebody else is warning me of those things. So that's been amazing to have a hearing assistant, and actually we've developed a really great working relationship outside of just being a hearing assistant, because we're away on residencies together. So we look at each other's self-care. I'm like Rachel, I kind of like, and a lot of artists, I just can't put it down. It's become my life. So I think I need to have a little chat with myself about, eating and sleeping and, the kind of stables that make you a well person. Because of my tinnitus, I tend to find it very, very difficult to sleep anyway. So it's very handy for me. Editing is something I can get lost in, and it sort of is a therapy in a way. My work is a therapy for my tinnitus and hyperacusis. But by the same token, you go, oh gosh, it's 5 o'clock in the morning. And so I kind of need to have a real look at that. I've just started looking at that myself, really. It was much easier to self-care when I was with the forests, because they won't let, you have to be mindful and very present when you're up a mountain, So yeah, I in terms of being grounded within the work, emotionally, I'm very grounded in the work, and the work is my life. I have to say, it's my life. That's how I feel about it.
I think it's really useful to remember the rhythm of a day, the rhythm of light within a day, the rhythm of the seasons, the way in which all my old hippie shit, as my kids would say, isn't. It is based in in good self-care practices.
Absolutely.
All of that stuff is really, really important.
But by the same token, as an artist, when the tide comes in, if the tide is coming in, if the creativity is coming in, you can't leave it till the morning.
Brilliant. Well, thank you both very much. Brilliant, incredibly evocative work that I know will change things for people. It will, because you can just see the power in the work that's there. And we'll use these little videos and the contacts that we have to kind of try and push those out. Never any promises. We never know what's going to happen. We don't know what the spending review is going to come and turn out with at the end of the week either. So, but it's about building tools and a sustainable approach to developing work, and knowing what you want is the first part of that. So I'm going to say thank you very much for your pitches today, and let you go and invite our next pitchies along, or rather their films first of all. So we're going to start off by seeing Mind the Gap's video pitch for Coral's Island.
Hello everybody, I am Joyce. I'm Artistic Director of Mind the Gap.
Hi, my name is Paul Bates and I am an artist at Mind the Gap.
So today we're going to pitch to you an outdoor performance that we R&D'd previously called Coral's Island. And then previously we worked with Nikki Miles Walden as our co-creator, and she directed this piece. So we want to gain more support to further develop this on. So Paul, can you tell us a little bit about the show Coral's Island?
Coral's Island is about a game show linked to climate change called Unhook a Duck, and Coral is the beauty queen that hosts the game show and has somebody who assists Coral by playing the game with the audience and supporting them, called Duck. And it's linked to climate change, and the idea of coral is connected to a coral that's fading away from under the sea. So coral is a beauty queen that's fading away because of the heat and the pollution from the sky, and she's past the prime.
Oh, can you tell us why do we want to make this show?
We want to make this show to bring awareness about climate change and to help the audience understand about climate change, but making it fun for the audience to be able to play and participate in a game show linked to climate change. So it's to help them understand by having a bit of fun with it, but also understanding the seriousness as well.
So Paul, can you say why do you think Mind the Gap should make this show?
I think they should do this show, Mind the Gap, because in my opinion, not many people with learning disabilities get to learn about subjects, a big massive topic about climate change, and sometimes teachers always think that people with learning disabilities might be scared, don't think it's appropriate for them to be learning about it, but I think that they should have the right to also learn, because nobody's banned from watching the news, and people with learning disabilities should learn so they can understand what's on the news at the same time and start to understand more clearly as they're watching the news as well.
Okay, so this is the performance we hope to get more support, time and money to work on. So Paul, if we have more time and money, what would you like to work on?
I'd love to be able to extend the set, maybe have a bit of like weather machine, have a fountain that wets people as they're trying to unhook the animals, and be able to stop the fountain so they have to be quick so they don't get too wet. Have a big stage that's extended so the audience can go around the Unhook a Duck set. and also win prizes as normal. And also I would like to have some training in learning how to be a bit of a swag, like drag queens do, and have some jokes up my sleeves and learn from the experts that do drag, and also learn from their experience as well.
Yeah, and also a deeper understanding into the climate issue itself, so that we could explain, or like in a more interactive and fun way, tell audience about the issue. So afterwards, we'd like to show you a few pictures from our pilot version, and after that, it will be Paul's a few photos of Paul in various previous shows. Thank you very much and enjoy.
Thank you.
Paul is in the character of Coral. He is wearing full face of makeup, a wig made of seaweed, a white long dress that parts in the middle, revealing a dark blue ruffly underskirt. The dress is decorated with yellow sponges, green fishing net, seashells, and snack wrappers. Coral welcomes the audience with a big smile and open arms. There is another character, Duck. She is standing next to a small wagon with "Unhook a Duck" written on the side, with a large red and yellow sun umbrella attached to it. Duck is in a dress that looks like the umbrella. Duck is telling the player to use the net to unhook the animals in the wagon. The wagon is filled with water, litter, fish nets, and seaweed. Paul in a little space. He is in a woolly jumper. His face is expressive and the background is dark and atmospheric. Paul in Zara. He is holding a human-sized baby bottle. In the next photo, Paul is holding a placard and answering questions from a news reporter played by another actor. The colors are very vibrant. Paul in Contained. He is in everyday clothes. One photo shows him sitting on a row of empty chairs. The other shows him speaking in a microphone. There are also a series of headshots showing his neutral face.
Excellent stuff. Wow. I've never seen those worlds come together, the kind of outdoor arts world, learning disability, climate change, drag, and hook a duck, or unhook a duck in this case, one of my favorite kind of games of my youth. I like the fish one as well. We're going to see our second little video and then we'll have a chat with those. The second one is by Gina Biggs and No Place Like Flat Home.
When we film our work, we edit. It's part of the process. We want to create a version of ourselves to present to the world. We are competent, professional, highly skilled. Our work as disabled artists has a point to make. We can do this. But what lies on the cutting room floor? Where are the mornings we can't get out of bed? The doubt and the fear. Working on a cold, inaccessible site? Where are the hot water bottles, the heat patches, the massages, the meds and the meltdowns which sit alongside the creative process? My name's Gina Biggs, and I'm a disabled artist managing a chronic pain condition with mental health challenges. Between now and next year, I have the huge privilege of a year's funded work on Flat Home, an island located in the Bristol Channel just off the south coast of Wales. In this time, I will be creating 4 professionally produced and seasonally focused films, as well as a shorter screen dance film. The work will chronicle the island's changing landscape in relation to the cycle of the year. Flat Home's environmental challenges make it a living microcosm of the damage humans are doing to our planet. And it shows us how we might redress and rebalance our relationship with it. The films will use my body in pain as a parallel story to the damage that we are doing to the earth. They will be competent, professional, and produced. But I want to share a different story with you. One with more ragged edges. One where we unravel, where we do not always understand the narrative and cannot predict the next move. I'd like you to join me on the adventure as we work out what it means to use my training in Eastern European ensemble theatre and the years I spent to develop this, to work instead in ensemble with the earth. I'd like you to seize what I can't do as well as what I can, and to create a second behind-the-scenes film which both celebrates the possibility of my work as a disabled performer and provides an honest, open example of the challenges it presents. By editing ourselves, we create a version, an avatar to present to the world. But if we don't tell the truth, even to ourselves, then it's too easy to think the problems are solved, the playing field level, and that the edit is the whole story.
Brilliant stuff. So it's a good job we got a big Zoom room, because if we can have everybody join us on screen. So Joyce and Paul, and I think Jess is coming on from Mind the Gap as well. Not Cheryl for this bit. You're allowed to rest up for this. Just the people who pitched recently. And Lydia, you're clearly not Gina.
Gina's here too.
Gina's here too. Excellent. Oh yes, can see you now. Again, fascinating pictures, and also both really linked by this: we can do this. What are we allowed to do, not allowed to do? Where is the truth within what we say and do about ourselves, these versions of ourselves? Because drag is almost the most extreme version that somebody can have of themselves. So really looking at that, I just wanted to ask Paul, first of all, where did that version of yourself come from? How long has Coral been there?
Well, we started developing Coral Island only this year, starting to think of stuff about how to make Coral into this beauty queen that fits in with climate change, which is based on this big project called Leave Your Light On For Me. And then we started to develop it and start to think of ideas of how to make into a bit of a game show linked to using climate change with animals and unhooking them, and be able to make like a game host, all dressed up in, like colours fading away and different things, and how things are changing for her. So it all started when we brought it to Lister Park, and then we started to show it to the audience that can participate in the game show and have a bit of like feminine with the character, and have a bit of jokes with the audience and get people to have fun with it instead of seeing the serious picture of it.
And when you started to perform Coral, was that something you'd always wanted to do, or was it an entirely new character, an entirely new thing just for this show?
Probably a new thing for me, because I've always seen like drag queens on TV, but I've never really watched it because I've never thought of watching it. I mean, I don't mind watching it, but it's just being that character is one of the most nerve-wracking things, because you're in a complete different character, like being a woman that you not normally are. So I always get more nervous to be a drag queen, but then with some training and be able to understand how drag queens can make jokes and have fun with it, I just need like the confidence to be able to develop it further and be able to have training how to become a drag queen. So it's something different that I've never experienced before.
I do have to apologise for the dog. I did say earlier that the dog may be making an appearance, and indeed it did. Gina, yours is the opposite. You are ultra you. When you perform, your works are you in the most extreme sense. I mean, I've known a number of your different pieces, and the centrality of you to them is really critical. Where does that come from, and how much of that is you, or is there a character there?
Thanks for that, Jo. My name's Gina. I'm a cis white woman, just turning 40, and I'm wearing a white top and blue scarf, blue glasses. I have a mostly shaved head with a lob of hair down the side, and I'm now accompanied also by a brown dog who's making an appearance. And we're sitting on our orange sofa at home. Yeah, where does it come from? Well, my training in Eastern European ensemble theatre was one that really is body first. So it's about making a connection with yourself. And then because it's ensemble training, it's about stripping back all those layers of the socialized layers. And then it's about finding from that point the connection with others. It was a very intense physical training, and obviously I'm managing a chronic pain condition that just cannot live up to that aesthetic. So my transition was then into non-stylized movement in the environment, more of a somatic practice. So I was looking more at connections with the environment as my ensemble. So I'm still coming from this very body-based practice that is still about, you know, tearing back these layers of socialization and the things that we think we should be or think we are, but also working with nature as an ally to help us do that. I think some of the previous presentations spoke about our disconnection and our rupture from nature, and I think in some of that relationship building, I'm trying to do more of that work of getting to the core of who I am. So yeah, I'm very central to my work, but if you were to know me personally, my work might come as quite a surprise because it's often very serious, it's very emotional, it's very intimate, and I am all those things, but I am also, you know, funny and cantankerous, you know, irritable, and all the kind of things that you will never really see on the screen, and that's all part of managing my condition. And a lot of that stuff never makes it through to the final edit because as an artist, my production value have very high production values. I like things to look very sleek and sorted. You know, it's the editing is key to that. And this is what I was saying in this. It's like, what happens if we kind of let a bit of seepage through? It probably is not going to be the artwork that I want to make, but there's definitely a different story in there to be told and shared that would be very relatable for other people.
What is it if we tell that whole story? And thank you so much. I forgot to ask everybody to introduce themselves and describe themselves. So brilliant. Thank you so much for jumping in on that. And I'll just recap and we'll do that all now. So Joyce, do you want to just tell us who you are? Oh, and you're on mute.
Hello, my name is Joyce and I am from Hong Kong. I got short black hair, wearing a white jumper, and I'm in Mind the Gap office in Bradford. And I'll be supporting Paul, and I co-create the Corals Island with Paul and the team.
Fantastic. And Paul, do you want to describe yourself to us?
Yeah, I'm a 28-year-old male. My pronouns is he and him, and I've got short brown hair, blue eyes, and I'm wearing a multicoloured pattern t-shirt today.
Fantastic. And Lydia.
Hi, I'm Lydia. I'm Gina's support worker and producer. I have shoulder length red hair. I'm a white woman. I'm in my 50s. I have glasses. I have a spaniel to the side of me, and I'm wearing a blue and white stripy top.
Excellent. Welcome to Crufts. My dog's a cockapoo who keeps nipping back and forth. Hopefully he's gone back to sleep now. He was given a walk so that he would sleep through this, and obviously has failed his dog obedience classes at this point. So back to the work. They're both works that are outdoors. in very different ways. I mean, Gina's isn't necessarily shown outdoors because it's film and screen work that's often shown in an indoor setting, but they both contend with elements within their creation. So I just want to ask you both, what's it like making work that relies upon the elements in such a changing environment? So Paul, how's that been for you? When you were doing this, what was the weather like? How difficult was it? What were the highs? What were the lows? Did you get wet?
Well, on the first day, because we did it within 2 days, the first day was a bit cloudy and a bit rainy, but then as we started to do the show and the audience started coming to see it, then it started to pick up a bit with the weather and become more sunny. And then on the second day, it was really lovely and really hot, and a lovely weather for it. So it worked really well for the second day as well.
And it's really interesting that your character, Coral, is a coral under the sea. And you're saying the weather gets hot and it's like warming up so that coral fading, loses the color. So that as like in general audience, it works better on a sunny day for outdoor show, but for coral under the sea, when it's hot, you shouldn't like it. And it's interesting that when you were saying that we get more investment, the steps you were thinking is you want to add more elements to it, like squirting water at people. I think we are, as like you are like a natural, like part of the nature, coral is a part of the nature. And then, so making use and responding to the elements. So we're treating it and was responding to it as a positive thing, as a gift, rather than a barrier that we need to be wary of.
I imagine, Gina, shooting all year long, all year round in outdoor environments, that's actually got to be quite dangerous or quite risky given various conditions, no?
Yeah, I mean, we've actually made that central to our artistic inquiry, and yeah, thank you for pointing out, because we didn't make it clear in the film, but this work is being developed as a screen dance piece with National Dance Company Wales, but also as a digital installation with Wales Millennium Centre for Festival of Voice 2022. But like you say, all of it is made outdoors, and central to that is the seasonality of that experience, because my pain actually fluctuates and my mental health changes across a year in relation to the weather, the temperature, and all of these elements. So in the development of it, what we've been supported to do is actually make that central to the process, to see what happens in terms of how I'm moving in the landscape, how I sound in the landscape. What I'm personally interested in seeing is what kind of choreographies are going to come in winter when it's freezing cold compared to summer when it's boiling hot, fingers crossed. So it's kind of like I'm still like curious as to how that's going to look and feel, but there are a number of challenges. I mean, it's a very difficult place to reach. The boats make it very accessible but inaccessible at the same time. So we were due to go there, had a team of 4 people booked to go out, and literally at 8 o'clock the night before it was like, right, you can't go because we can't guarantee that we'll be able to get you back because we think the weather's going to change once you're there. So you're working with all these different kind of elements in terms of actually physically getting yourself to site. And as a disabled artist, that's super, super challenging. I mean, if I was to self-produce that work, it would be way, way, way too much for me. So I think site work, there is a kind of argument to say that it needs even more support, because logistically there's so much more to deal with. I mean, that's just my experience of having worked in indoor and outdoor venues. So yeah, it's kind of, but the thing with my somatic practice is central to the kind of way of working is you're asking constantly, what is my internal weather today? And how does that meet the external weather today? So you're really brought into a very present moment. And I think that's why I use this work as part of my self-care, being in nature and making work in relation to nature as part of my self-care, because it brings a great amount of immediacy to whatever you're going through or whatever you're experiencing, and creates that kind of container for you to explore and move through it.
But I think that it's a side of access we don't talk about very often. People are very clued up on, when do we need an interpreter? When is there a ramp? When these things? But actually, to talk about some of these other areas of access, I think it's even more important, because they are the real barriers that if we don't talk about them, we don't have that support, we can't get on and make the work that we want to make. And I think, Paul, that also speaks to what you were saying about learning disabled people not being included in the conversation around climate justice or the climate emergency. If people are shielded away from that conversation, how will they gain that understanding? So how did you first become aware of it? What are the things that have helped you really understand it better?
I started understanding it when advertisements started coming up on TV, and also watching, I watch BBC News regularly every day, usually at 10 o'clock at night. And I've started to hear a lot of stuff about Glasgow conference that's coming up. I'd like to learn more about what that conference is going to be about and what the next step is with climate change. And also, I've learned a lot more about the royal family now being connected to it and doing the Earth. There was the Earth shot that happened, and starting to understand documentaries by David Attenborough and Greta Thunberg, which I've heard years ago when Greta came and started learning. So I've learned mainly through TV, but at schools, I never really got the chance to learn it until I became nearly 30 years old, like late 20s. And then when I went to Mind the Gap and started building the big project on climate change, that's when I started to understand it better, and understanding and making warm-up games based on it, and be able to understand more clearly than what I didn't when I was at school.
Why do you think it is that people stop you from learning about it at school? What do you think people are afraid of?
I think it's more about, because I've got autism, and I went to special school, a lot of schools, like teachers, even when I was at mainstream before I went to special school, they were worried that they didn't want to worry people with autism or people with learning disabilities to be learning it, because they were scared that they might maybe overreact or get paranoid or start kicking off or something, and they were worried about if I would kick off from learning something like that. And also, teachers used to always take me out of class and put me in a room and learn something that was more basic, easy to learn than learning with other students. So, which was a shame really, because I've always, now that I'm understanding about climate change, I'm starting to understand it's becoming more interesting, and I'm loving learning about it. And it's actually quite exciting to learn about it and understand than it did when I was at school and only learning half through parents or through news. So it's been quite difficult when I was at school learning things I wanted to learn.
And it's something, again, that everybody else has access to. So why would you? It's like a long time ago when I started to lose my hearing, subtitles wouldn't have swear words on them. So they would cut them out, they would edit them out, because deaf people didn't need to see those words. And it's kind of like, please don't make the decision for me about what I can cope with. Don't make the decision for you about what you can cope with. These things are for everybody. And again, it's about other people determining access, other people determining what we can and can't do.
I think, sorry, Jo, if I can just say something to that. It's a really interesting point, because I'm actually also training at the moment to be a counsellor, and one of the things that we talk about a lot is eco-anxiety and the rise of eco-anxiety in young people. So I can hear like some of that in what Paul was sharing about the schools. But the fact is, it is a real thing and it is out there. So I think that what we do as artists has like a really big role to play there. Because if you're just hearing it from the news, if you're just hearing it from these kind of like one-sided perspectives, and you're not in a position where the connections are being made, or you're being supported to know what action you can take, or being given a voice in that, and you're just sinking with these messages, then of course it's going to create anxiety in a young person. So I think like the work that we do is really important to beginning to address that, which is a really new phenomena in terms of mental health in young people.
Absolutely. And what impact do you want your work to have on an audience? I'm going to ask you both. So I'll ask Gina first of all. What do you want audiences to feel or to observe or to take away when they experience your work?
A sense of their own humanness, space for permission for their own experiences of grief, loss, changed identity. We've all been through a massive change with COVID. And the thing was, for me, this work was born out of that time. And what a lot of people were saying, oh, it's an apocalypse. But for me, it was the greatest exposure of ableism I'd ever seen, because suddenly everyone was in my position. Everyone was having to question who they were going to become after this. They were yearning for their old life. They were grieving an identity, a collective identity, an individual identity that they had. So on that level, I hope the film gives people a space to really touch that part in themselves, to give themselves that space to recognize themselves in what they're seeing, and to have much deeper connections with themselves so they can be more authentic in their lives and be more empathic as a result of that, being able to access a deeper part of themselves, but also to bring awareness to the climate change and to use Flathome as the kind of microcosm for that, because really you can see 360 the damage that humans are doing by just spending time on that island. And there are so many narratives, such as the gulls who go back to the landfill sites and come back and then regurgitate pellets of glass, plastic, and as a result are dying of botulism from paralysis. It's like a bacteria infection, and then you've got Hinkley Nuclear Power Station that has just flooded the skylines with light pollution. There's marine life washing up on shore. I found a dead baby porpoise there with a fence impaled through it last time. You spend long enough there, you see it. So one thing that I also want to show in the film is that these landscapes, natural in inverted commas, because obviously no space is entirely natural, it's humans shape it. They are magical and they are enchanting, and I want people to be like drawn into that. But at the same time, I want people to see things for how they really are, to see past the enchantment of, oh, it's a lovely island, and to see what's happening right here and now. And the thing is, with chronic pain, what I realised when I went back a year after the R&D is that I was writing about this shoulder pain that I was still talking about a year later as if it was an injury. And it occurred to me then that the chronic side of what I'm going through, it's like climate change in that yes, we have landfalls, we have tsunamis, we have these big moments of weather events that say, oh yes, climate change. But actually it's much more gradual and persistent and chronic, basically. So I'm hoping to use my invisible disability to share that narrative as well.
And same question to Paul. What do you want audiences to get from Coles Island? What's the impact you want to see on them?
I like for the audience to get from Coral Island that to see people with learning disabilities hosting a game show about climate change and to have fun with it. So it's nothing about the seriousness and having it to be very serious, that the audience can have fun with it, understand while they're having fun with the game, and be able to understand and get people with learning disabilities and to show them that they can have the right to understand about the topic, and to also be able to think of their ideas as well, and be able to have fun while they're playing and be more clear in the mind of what's out there for them to understand, and that they have the right to be able to understand through playing the game and having more fun.
And is it just aimed at learning disabled audiences, or is it aimed at everyone?
It can be aimed at everyone. So it can be aimed at everyone as well, but also learning disabilities too that can also learn together. So it's more about learning as equal people.
Yeah,
So they all have the right together.
and through a fun, interactive experience, not just through sitting there being lectured or a school lesson or whatever.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, we're getting close to the end now, so I'm just going to ask you both for one more thing, which is people watching this, what do you want them to do? So Gina, in one line, what would you like?
I think I'm going to let my wonderful producer Lydia deliver this message. She'll be better at that than me.
So what we're looking for is a financial investment to make this additional film, which tells the story of the making of the work. It is a horrifically difficult site to work on, but absolutely a microcosm of what's happening to the planet. So we're looking for financial investment, and if we were lucky enough to be able to make this additional work, we're also looking for help to distribute the work and reach wider audiences.
Brilliant, thank you. And Paul, what are you looking for?
We're looking for like, I'll probably pass this on to Joyce and see what she says.
That's fine.
Yeah.
The same, like monetary investment. So we need more time and money to work more on, to give more time to exploring this, and possibly collaborators who could be like production designer and drag training for Paul, and also any ideas, your thoughts, your questions, your support, to get in touch with, just also inspire us as well.
Fantastic. So if people want to get in touch, we'll make sure that on the tweets that we're putting out, we'll put contact details for everybody so people can get in contact with you. And obviously when we share these online, we'll have contact details there too. I'm just coming up to the very end now, and I've been reminded to remind people that we've got Aidan Mosby's piece available for people to see as well, which is brilliant. I've seen it twice. I was lucky enough before all of the COVID things happened to see it live, and I've also seen the online version, and I can't decide which I like best. So absolutely do follow in the chat the link to find Aidan Mosby's I Was Naked Smelling of Rain. I think everybody's been emailed it as well, but we'll definitely put it in there, and we're going to put everybody's contacts in the chat now so that people can follow up with you and hopefully get you what you need to complete the projects as you would wish. Again, no promises, but the more people who know what you need, the more likely it is that those things will happen. So thanks ever so much for coming along to this part today. It's brilliant to see such incredible work emerging in this time that we're still in, this COVID time.
I just really wanted to say a massive thank you for everybody that joined our event today, and I wanted to take a moment to thank the pudding team for our pudding session, as well as thanking our morning's panelists, so Nikki, Hassan, Cheryl and Emma, and then also the artists who pitched their work, which was all really incredible. So that was Rachel, Cheryl, Gina and producer Linda, and Paul and Joyce from Mind the Gap. A massive thank you to interpreters today, Lauren and Natasha, and our captioner Joanne, and Roberto, who's been in the background creating visual notes, Alistair, who's been live tweeting, and our tech wizard Ben Pugh, as well as colleagues Tony and Harry. And a final thank you to Arts Council England for supporting this event. Thank you so much.